Other way.
There we go. There we go. Mike, what's happening, brother? What's happening?
No, I'm moving this thing all over the wrong ways.
Guys, if you have a question for Mike, do us a favor. You can hit the hashtag Ask Mike, and if you have a question, we'll right here for Mike, we'll bring it up. Mike, we were talking about some spring and the scrimmage that happened this week. The first question I got for you, my friend, is there been one thing this spring that's kind of caught your eye, something that you're wanting to see this Saturday, or something that you'll continue to monitor as the season goes on? What's the one thing that you've seen that you've liked so far?
Well, the obvious is you want to go to spring and you don't want to have any issues with, injuries. And we've got a few of them, but none of them seem to be catastrophic that we know of right now. So that's a positive. And you want to get through the spring game with the same thing. So I really think, look, it's obviously the big question mark was linebackers on defense. I think they're going to be fine there. I think, obviously you had a rash of injuries in the defensive backfield last year. We heard really good things about Jay Ward and his performances this spring. I think the quarterback spot, that's just going to be a battle, I think, all the way through the summer. I don't know that based on what I'm hearing, that there's one guy that's head and shoulders above 2 and 3. So that's I think, going to make things interesting. And of course, we're all going to be wondering how that's going to shake out. How many of those 4 quarterbacks are still going to be there in September? And that's something that, that staff has got to be very cognizant of. The injuries at running back, that's one thing that Ed Orgeron has lamented in all of his press conferences. So, but, he's got solutions there. I think he's wanting to push Tyrion Davis-Price. I think he's wanting to push John Emery. And then he wants Armani Goodwin and Corey Kiner to come in June and hit the ground running, and maybe one or both of those guys have an impact early to go along with the other 2 guys. I mean, LSU's going to have, 5, 6 running backs. So I think that group's solid. Hearing good things about Devonta Lee, offensive line, got some depth there, but still, I don't know. There's a lot I want to see, but, as making phone calls, the news coming out of scrimmages has been real tight-lipped. This past Saturday is usually your biggest scrimmage, where the highest impact and where the guys make the most noise, and it's been awfully quiet. The only thing I've gleaned from the weekend was that the defense was outstanding on Saturday. So, and that's to be. I mean, you expect that. You got a brand new offensive coordinator, passing game coordinator, doing different things there, and you've got a lot of veterans on that defense. So. That's some of it. I went a little long on you, but yeah.
Mike, we just got done talking about that because a lot of the things that happen when I come out here and say that the defense did really good Saturday is Blake, our offense really sucks. And I'm like, no, just calm down. Look, nobody in the country, Mike, knows what Durante Jones wants to do. They don't know what he's going to do on third down. They don't know the packages. They don't know anything he's going to do. The only man on the country that really knows from a really scheme standpoint is Jake Peets. The thing that I keep hearing, Mike, and maybe you could talk about this the same, is that this is going to be a defense that's very multiple. They're going to run zone. They're going to run man. They're going to have 3-man fronts, 4-man fronts. Is that a lot of what you're hearing too?
Yeah, I think they want to be multiple. I think you've got a lot of defensive linemen. You got a nice mix of guys that, with a lot of experience, with some newcomers, and Jaquelin Roy coming to his second year, Ojulari. Mason Smith, of course, who he's singled out as being his best inside pass rusher and can push for start playing time. A guy who I keep asking about is Jacobian Guillory, and I'm like, is he asking questions about, why isn't his name getting dropped? I mean, Orgeron's pretty much a guy who gives you the tell. I mean, if he's dropping your name, he's dropping it for a reason, and he usually is not good at hiding. And I would have liked to have heard him saying more about Jacobian Guillory this spring. And so far, he hasn't said anything. So, I'm asking a guy in the program, and one of my sources, what's going on with Jacoby, said, no, look, he's just got a lot of good guys in front of him right now. When you've got all those guys who opted to come back and take that free year, and of course, he's coming off an injury. So I really want to see him on Saturday. That's the guy. When we've been out at practice, and I've been out to 3 practices now, and we're going to have access on Thursday. the defensive linemen are always on the other 2 football fields away, and we don't get to see them. They're hitting a sled, and I mean, seriously, the sideline that we get, and if you're familiar with LSU's practice facility, there's 4 football fields. Well, we're on the furthest sideline, and the defensive linemen are always on the other, the furthest away, easily 100 yards away most of the practice. So being able to see particularly the inside guys has been very difficult in the amount of time that we've had at practice. I mean, heck, 2 Thursdays ago, we had 8 minutes.
I want to see that too, Mike, and I want to see a lot of things. Jay Ward is a guy that you alluded to earlier. We talked about. I've been, as Buddy Stongy calls me, the CEO and president of the Jay Ward fan club. I know he goes on with you on Thursdays, and guys, you can check that out on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll let Mike tell you more about that. Look, Brandon Taylor was a guy, and I know that I alluded to it, and I'm not just saying this because he's a good friend of the show and he's a good friend of mine, but Brandon Taylor made a leap from corner to safety, and it really paid off for him. Mike, are we seeing something like this in Jay Ward? I heard he had another great scrimmage this past Saturday. Is he a guy that we all need to be watching out for as a big impact player? Because quite honestly, he had one of the best ends of the seasons than anybody on that team.
Yeah, and I equate some of that too is him getting his bearings. I think him getting bigger and stronger. I think him getting acclimated. I was on a show in Alexandria earlier tonight that I do every Monday, and there's no denying the caliber of Louisiana high school football player that is usually more than most states are usually more ready to play early on than a lot of recruits from other states. That's just a fact. There's several other states that are similar that have a hard-nosed football and real hungry kids that weren't pampered and aren't playing frou-frou football. And so, yeah, I think Jay Ward, Corey Raymond did a fantastic job locating him and knowing what he could do. And I think he was just starting to come into his own. And unfortunately, it was an off year. And then he had the year before. So I don't know. I think he's going to be. I want to see him, but I'm always also a little. There's always some caveats. It seems like every spring there's some guys that we're hearing are really making moves, and then at the end of the year we're like, early in the year we were hearing so much about so and so, and that didn't happen. I don't think he's going to be that guy, but I mean, who were we talking about last year? Jordan Tolles,
right?
At this same juncture, yeah.
Even Ed Orgeron said Jabril Cox is the best player on the field, and sometimes that didn't, pan out to be. So yeah, I greatly agree with you there, Mike. Look, let's get to some questions. The people are firing them off. Dorian Starkey, where I get my haircut at his place here in Hammond at Ryan's Barbershop, he says, Mr. Scarborough, who do you think the next guy to commit in the 2022 class would be? Is there some names out there, Mike, that you think that could be committing soon?
Yeah, look, I think I tell you what, I think, Emory Jones obviously has been close. I think Jake Johnson, Max's brother, has been close. But what I do think is once the summer gets here and the recruiting dead period is over at May 31st at midnight, and the camps start coming, the official visits, there's going to be a lot of kids in cars with families hitting as many schools as they can to make up for lost time. And I suspect there's going to be not only a flurry of 22 commitments, and those should be in the upper teens by August. But I think there's going to be a big number of 23 commits. And then we're also going to see some 24 kids start to get offers as they start attending LSU's camp. So the summer is going to be nonstop. Last summer and the summer before, it was like July was when, if you were a guy that does what I do, you would that would be the time to take a vacation. I don't think that's going to be the case at all this summer.
Well, let's expand on that a little bit, because the dead period, like you mentioned, ends at May 31st at 12 a.m., June 1st. And look, I know that we've alluded to it. I know that you've alluded to it, that you think that there could be some camps. You just mentioned it here. Look, LSU probably really wants to see these kids live and in action, going one-on-one against other really talented guys. You talk about this summer. There's some guys like Ricky Collins, who you put me on, the kid from Woodlawn, who you've been on top of for a long time. Could you see a kid like that getting an offer? Could you see kids that just come off the radar because of everything that's been going on getting offers? Is that what you're expecting this summer?
I do. I don't know that Ricky Collins is going to be that guy, but I think Ricky Collins is going to be at a minimum a kid that's going to know that LSU is on him big time, because he's local, and you've got Arch Manning with an offer right now. You've got Eli Holstein at Zachary. There's probably going to be a little bit of how that's going to play out. But when I saw him last August and throughout last season, I just knew because of him not being able to attend camps last summer. We're talking about Ricky Collins from Woodlawn, coached by Marcus Randall. Once coaches had a chance to see him, and he's been out on the camp circuit. He was MVP at the Rivals camp in Dallas this weekend. And so he's already got Arkansas and Mississippi State. I think there's going to be more offers coming for him. He's just an exceptional athlete. But, the question is going to be, and this is where LSU is going to get, I think, with their quarterback room. Look, if he just goes to camp and just blows them away, you have to offer him right away, period. There's no gamesmanship, no politics, period. But I think, like right now, there's still a debate as to whether this is a 2-quarterback class for the class of 2022. I don't think LSU knows that until you know how many quarterbacks are sitting there enrolled in the fall semester at LSU. That might make a difference. And then you try to go forward and figure out, okay, at midterm you get Walker Howard, and whether you take another one there, and then as all of a sudden the class of 23 become a 2-quarterback class. And I think that all depends on if you're down to 3 scholarship quarterbacks at midterm or next spring.
Well, Mike, it's definitely a good problem to have. I always feel like we were always going through this process like, hey, are we going – I forget the kid from Texas who played private school, Garrett something, I forget his name. And then, you never have a kid from Louisiana that'd be here. Now you have multiple kids in Louisiana that you can go get scholarships, and kids that probably have always wanted to come to LSU. In the time that you've been doing Tiger Bait, can you remember a time that Louisiana as a whole has been this deep quarterback?
Never. I've never seen anything like this in consecutive years. It's absolutely insane. And it's because a lot of high school coaches, you still got your schools out there. They're going to run the veer, and they're going to run it for many decades to come. But you've got a lot of schools out there that have switched to the RPO offenses, and these kids have been running it since the 8th grade. There's a lot of people say, why is this happening now? I think that's part of it. The RPO offenses, these kids just have taken to it. They love it. I think it's, you can a little bit of 7-on-7 is a factor of it. Then there's also a belief that there's a lot of kids that maybe might have been that are playing quarterback that might have been baseball prospects that they're not they hadn't been participating in all the travel ball and all that stuff, and that number has dwindled. And those type of kids that would have been lost to baseball are there for football before they even hit high school.
Mike, an interesting point, because an RPO in some aspects, not all aspects, has a veer type of option read feel to it. It's still from an offensive line perspective, same concepts, right? You're just going from the spread and you're telling an inside receiver to run a slant. There's not a lot of differences in that give, take, or throw. So maybe that's a good point.
It's the RPO and they're running spreads. I mean, look what they do at St. Thomas More. Look what they did at Catholic High under Fertitta. A lot of schools running that offense. These guys are, and if they've been running it since the 9th grade. Some of them even, a little bit middle school. So I think that's part of it. But I mean, look, it doesn't look like it's going to tail off anytime soon. I've been saying for the last year or two. We look back to that summer of 19 when you had TJ and Max, you had Caleb Williams, you had Walker Howard, you had Altmaier, Luke Altmaier, that's committed to Ole Miss, was at that camp. You had Ty Simpson, who's considered to be a little higher rated than Walker Howard by some people. Committed to Alabama. Well, he was at. People forget that he was at that LSU camp. You had Arch Manning there the week before or the week after the 7-on-7. It was the most insane stretch of LSU camps, and particularly that 3-day period. Nussmeier was there on the Saturday. I mean, it was just, and I'm forgetting some guys. I mean, it was just the best camp of quarterbacks I've ever seen at LSU. You could probably combine the previous 5 years of quarterbacks together and wouldn't have equaled the quality and the high caliber of the kids I just named. It was insane. So I'm gonna be curious if they're gonna be able to get that same type of kids here this coming summer once we get the dates. And normally you have your June for camp, and then July is a dead period, and that's usually where coaches will take 2 weeks vacation, and then you'll have sandwiched in there your SEC football media days. I wonder if they're just going to say, "Hey, there's no time off." I wonder if they're going to open it up on June 1, and they're going to say, "Let's go." You're going to have June and July for camps and visits.
Mike, they should, right? Like you mean it's
I think they have to.
Right. I mean, you think Ed Orgeron, who loves recruiting, is going to say, "Hey, you guys can take X amount of days off in July, not being able to see these kids." And I think coaches want to see them. Like for example, there are some kids that you're not able to see in person, and you just have to watch the film. Coaches don't like that, I'm sure, right? You've talked to coaches about this before.
Yeah, and I think it's really it's a disadvantage to everybody. I know some will say, well, schools like LSU have been at an advantage with this lockdown. Maybe so, but I think the mid majors in particular really need this to get opened up. I think, and Orgeron has been fantastic with this for the other state schools. Every summer since he's been here, when he opens up his elite camp or his camps, all the college coaches at all the other state schools are allowed to attend. I think they're going to be there in droves at the LSU camp because they need to see these kids. Because I think it's really hurt them more than LSU. But there's no doubt they all want to see these kids against their peer groups. They're the one-on-ones to see what you're looking at, because huddle tape's one thing, Twitter videos one thing, working out with their hired trainer in the spring is one thing. You really need to have these kids standing in front of you and be able to size them up and see what they look like in street clothes.
Mike, to your point, and I forget the kids' names and I forget how many, but there was like 3 or 4. If you remember when LSU did that at Southeastern in Strawberry Stadium, Southeastern signed 3 of those kids, 3 or 4 of those kids based off that small camp that they did. So that's a really good point. Okay, a couple more questions. Vic asked, #ask Mike, updates on Shamir Stewart and Walter Nolan.
Yeah, I think LSU's in real good shape with both of them. Nolan, of course, is going to have – I think LSU's probably – look, I think they're in good shape with both of them. I think Nolan is going to be a guy that you wait to see win those visits and how they're staggered. Of course, Nolan being an offensive lineman, he's going to have a lot of schools that that's always going to be a toughie. Don't forget LSU still has Emory Jones out there. But how big of an offensive line class does this end up being for LSU? Does it go as high as 5? Could it even get to 6? I mean, when you start figuring out, if you know right now, think about it. You haven't heard anything on Perry, and you haven't heard anything on Cardell Thomas, have you, this spring?
No, I have not.
So
nothing good.
So now you've gotten to the point where you're recruiting over those guys.
Well, then, Mike, I mean, I hate to say this, but when you bring in 2 guys from this past class, I mean, signing 5, it's kind of like a bare minimum, right? Like they got to do that. That's kind of like a non-negotiable, wouldn't it seem?
Right, and then and that's another point as to where this camp comes in. If you got a pretty good lay of the land of what 23 is going to look like for you in Louisiana, because look, offensive linemen don't grow on trees. And it certainly makes it difficult for James Craig. We've seen it. He's probably got a tougher task than anybody else on that staff when the state is not giving him what he needs at his position. When he's got to go out of state and go against everybody, the Ohio States, the Clemsons, for the best of the best. And usually your best of the best, there's like 2 or 3 of them. And still when they get there, you don't know what you're really getting. So, but if they have an idea of what Louisiana looks like for 23, if they think it's a little slim, then maybe you push the limits on 23 on 22 class if you can get up to 6.
I think that the more linemen you have, the better, but you're speaking to a former lineman. So, all right, a couple more questions, Mike, and we'll get you out of here. Mike Scarborough from TigerBait.com is our guest. We'll let you know everywhere you can get his stuff. Blaine Smith says, #Ask Mike, any running back recruits you hearing LSU's in a good position for? I know they got a couple good kids in state.
3 good ones. Look, I love Le'Veon Moss. I think LSU's way out front for him. I know, Alabama and everybody else is offered him. I just think LSU's positioned themselves so well with him. He's a super kid too. Not real active on Twitter. He's not a guy who needs all the attention. And I like that about him. You're talking about a kid that, he could have transferred to several schools, and there was the rumors out there last summer he could have went to Walker. His mom actually moved to Walker. He could have transferred there, and he opted to stay in Estruma with those guys and work hard on a small roster, and I give him big props for that. So I think the world of that kid, and Coach Gladney and those guys at Estruma, they work hard. So and look, Citizen. Go ahead.
I was going to say,
Citizen at Lake Charles Prep big time. You got Trevor Etienne at Jennings. So I think Citizen, all along we were looking at those two. And so a lot of people believe that your class is going to be Citizen and Moss, and then Etienne will end up at Clemson or somewhere else. Whereas before Citizen got the offer, you thought it might be the other way around. And so we'll see how that plays out.
I know that you're all over this kid, so I have to ask this question. I usually don't double up on these from people, but Vic says, #Ask Mike, is Aaron Anderson out of Carr the best wide receiver in the state in your opinion? I know that you've been all over this kid. And
I love him. He's just, when you see his ball skills, his balance, the way he moves after the catch, I tweeted out several times, he's Josh Reed 2.0. I probably shouldn't have went that far with it, but I mean, he has that and part of it, the reason why I went there with him is, and he's probably a little faster than Josh Reed. I want to see how he tests in the 40, but the fact he's got that running back, that former running back build. He's got some legs on him. He's not a tall kid. He just got you get space that could damage some people, and great ball skills, very aware of where the ball's at. If there's a tip ball, he's got that, that fast twitch mind to muscle, that Tyrann Mathieu ball skill thing. I've seen it. You can see it on his highlight film. I mean, I just think the world of him. He's my number one. But look, I mean, you got Shaz Preston and a bunch of other guys out there that are also very good. But yeah, no, I like Anderson.
Mike,
and when we saw where Alabama came and offered him recently, and you can say what you want about Saban and this and that, but I assure you, when he sees tape of Aaron Anderson, he's seeing the same thing.
And he's had those guys like a Jalen Waddle, guys that are just explosive in space and can make things happen in space, and that's a hell of a comp. He's like a Tyrann Mathieu on the offensive side.
Yeah, Mike and Carr's a well-coached team, obviously in the championship hunt every year. Play great competition on their schedule and through the playoffs. And I love that kid.
Carr's always producing and always has a really good team and really good talent. Mike, you've been fantastic as always. I know people know where to get you and to subscribe to, but for anybody who's listening to us for the first time or seeing you for the first time, tell everybody where they can get it and the AYS promo code.
Yeah, I keep that live for you and your guys at all times. If you go into TigerBait to subscribe, use promo code AYS30, and rather than get the 7-day $1 trial period, you'll get TigerBait for 30 days. And I always say, if you go ahead and try us for $1, go ahead and click the box so that you choose. If it goes live, you stick with us, and I think you will. We got a high retention rate. Choose the annual package. Because you're getting 3 months free when you choose that. It's less money. You only get billed once a year, but we want to have you. We got a great building community on our Tiger Den premium message board. You get our text alerts for breaking news. You get our newsletters, all our recruiting updates, all our premium content, the works, and everybody who's been on the new Tiger Bait just loves it. And so check us out at tigerbait.com.
My first stop every morning, and when news is going on, especially in recruiting, Mike is our go-to spot. Mike, as always, thank you, my friend. We'll talk soon.
Anytime, Blake. Thanks.